Okay, on that note, I will introduce Liz Elgosin, who is going to speak about her Baha'i faith.
Morning. And actually, he told me I'm not supposed to touch it, that I'm supposed to talk into it, up. I don't think I need a microphone. I think I'm perfectly capable of dominating a room should I need to.
Unfortunately, the streamers may not hear you.
I'm Liz Elgosin. I've been a Baha'i since think hard, Liz, 1978. No longer than that. The Baha'i faith is a universal, worldwide faith that was founded out of Iran about 175 years ago. The founder of the faith was a man who took the name Baha'u'llah, which means glory of God, and the word Baha'i, or Baha, is glory in Persian, and so people who are Baha'is are people of glory. Take that as you will. It took me, when I was learning about the faith, it took me almost 2 years to be able to say Baha'u'llah. And if I tell you that friends of mine, they would literally spend evenings trying to get me to say the name properly and dying of laughter, yes, it can be hard. The subtitle that I gave Tanya was How I Found the Faith After 12 Years. And I've done some thinking, and it's been a lot longer than that. I started out as a good Catholic girl down in Connecticut, but I began to question. I had queries. I had doubts. I had never lost my faith in God. But there were things that came up, and I kept saying, why does a 79-year-old ancient Italian man who is celibate tell me, an American teenage girl, how I'm supposed to run my sex life? Why is this important? How do they know? What do they do? How do they know modern time? Typical teenage. But while I lived in my mother's house, I went to Mass and I followed the practice. When I went away to college, I went to the University of Miami. And at the time, I could get the Miami Herald delivered to my dorm room door. And the girl who did it was black, was a student. This is how she earned her extra money. We got to be very friendly, and somehow or other it came up. And I said, oh, well, what religion are you? And she said, I'm a Baha'i. And I said, oh. Right over the head. 2 years later, I transferred up to the University of Hartford. At that time, the University of Hartford was not what you would call dorm ready. They were just transitioning from being a commuter school to a regular university with dorms. And literally the week before classes were to start, I got a call saying, would I mind staying in the resident advisor's guest room? Another girl and I would be sharing it. And this was a little enclosed suite, bathroom, the resident advisor, and us two girls. She had a picture of a beautiful building on her door, the resident advisor did, who also happened to be black. And I said, that's a lovely building. I said, what's that? And she said, that's the House of Worship in Panama. I said, the house of worship? What's that? She said, it's the Baha'i house of worship. I said, Baha'i? What's that? It's a religion. It's my religion. I said, oh, right over the top. I did college, went to grad school, came back. And as a side note, I should mention, in my family, both of my brothers were born with cystic fibrosis. My brother Peter died at 13. My brother Matt was still alive and going and very active. He would die when he was 26. Part of the reason that they stayed alive as long as they did, because when they were born, the life expectancy was 7. It is now, I might add, 54 years old. Was a treatment, what we call treatments, postural drainage. You pound the, well, if you look at the demonstration, it's tap, 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 tap on the back. No, we'd put a good piece of music on, boom, bitty, boom, bitty, boom, bitty, boom, bitty, boom. And 4 times a day, my brothers got their treatments. And we changed the music out. My brother was very into music, and he says to me one day, I've got this album I think you'd really like. I said, what? He said, it's this group, it's Seals and Crofts. I said, oh, do we have to? Because I liked the music, and he wanted something. All right, fine, we'll put it on. And he said, you really like them, they're very spiritual. We put it on, and I really like Seals and Crofts. I said, I wonder what, I look at, oh, they're Baha'is. Over the head again. I have my degree, I'm working, I have the opportunity, or life gives me the chance, and I go and fulfill one of my things I've always wanted to do, which was go into Peace Corps. I ended up in Costa Rica. Now, when you're in Peace Corps, usually there's a group of you that meets, you go through language training together, and you kind of keep those bonds because you are in a foreign country that is different, and you need a support network. And one of the girls in the group that was after me, a girl named Rebecca, who was black, said to me, I thought, well, she doesn't seem to have any friends. She doesn't seem to hang out with her group when I would casually meet this, that, and the other. So I invited her to one of the local bars that we had, kind of a Peace Corps hangout. And she said, I don't drink. I said, don't worry, you don't have to drink. Just come and just be with the group. I wasn't a big drinker, wasn't a problem with me. And I said, as we were sitting there drinking our Cokes, I said, if you don't mind my asking, why don't you drink? She says, I'm a Baha'i. I said, what's a Baha'i? And she told me. She said, it's a religion and it's so forth, and we don't drink. I said, do you have any books on that? I'm a librarian by trade. I'm a reader by avocation and nature. You tell me something, I want to read about it. So she brought me some books, and I started reading. And I started reading. And then I got invited to parties. And I met other Baha'is. And I was liking what I was reading. So what was the Baha'i faith? What is the Baha'i faith? I'd been searching for a religion for a long time. None of the religions I'd looked into fit me. But one of the first things I read about the Baha'i faith is that you have responsibility for your own actions. I liked that. You can't blame the blame and say, well, it's because of my mother, it's because of whatever. You made a choice, you did the action, you take the consequences. I really, really liked that. And then I'm reading along, and I'm like, oh, The underlying theme of the Baha'i faith is unity. And everything revolves around this concept, the oneness of mankind. Unity is what brings or will bring the world together. And in reality, we are all the same. We are all branches of the same tree, flowers in the same garden. We are all the same. I liked that. I thought, I'm liking this. I'm liking this. I can't pronounce the names, but I'm liking this. So where's the hook? I mean, hey, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I'm as cynical as anybody. Where's the hook? So I'm reading on and I'm going, what are the no's? Well, you know what the no's are? No drinking. No drugs. No gambling. I thought. Anything that threatens the basic unit of civilization, which is the family, is pretty much prohibited. Now, no sex outside of marriage. I grumbled at that, even though God knows I certainly wasn't doing anything at the time. But then when you come down and you think about it, it's not a case of keeping pure. It's not a case of keeping celibate for this, that, and the other. It's the fact that having sex outside of a committed relationship, in fact, threatens the unity of the family. And the unity of the family, which is where the children are born, that becomes a problem. Having listened to Tanya over the years, there's no clergy. There are no ministers, there are no priests, there's none of that. I liked that very much. Because I really didn't like the fact that somebody was telling me what to do. In effect, what I'm saying for myself was, in the Baha'i faith, you make the choice. I have known people who said to me, oh, I knew a Baha'i and he was the worst drunk you ever want to meet in your whole life. Well, that's fine. He may have been a Baha'i. He made the choice not to follow what he agreed to, which was not to drink. But it's not up to me to stop him. He made the choice. He will live with the consequences. Now, the Baha'i faith comes out of Islam the way that Christianity comes out of Judaism. Islam knew that there were, because of the writings, another manifestation of God that would be coming, which was not, shall we say, popular, because this is a threat on the power being held by individuals. Let us face it, we're living through it right now. People are coercing onto their perceived power as the world changes around them. The first of the manifestations, I put it similar to a role of John the Baptist, was a man that was called the Bab. He called himself the Bab, which means the gate, because through him would come the manifestation of God. He was executed by the Shah because he has gathering people to him to what is in effect the same message as the Baha'i faith. There is I'm trying to phrase this in a way that doesn't sound too namby-pamby. There is, in many ways, no classism in the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah came from a family of merchants. He came from a very wealthy family of merchants. He became a follower of the Bab, and because of his own actions, he too was thrown into prison, but because of his family was not executed. He had followers who were following him, and while he was in prison, he had his revelation that he was the manifestation that the Bab had been talking about. Now, the Shah did not know what to do with this man. He couldn't execute him. They'd already run into trouble when they executed the Bab. You couldn't do this with Baha'u'llah's family not getting upset. So he punted. He sent Baha'u'llah originally to Baghdad, and from Baghdad to Constantinople to the Ottoman Emperor. The Ottoman Emperor didn't quite know what to do with him either. Because what do you do with a man who preaches peace, unity, equality? What? No difference between poor and rich? That you should treat every person as you find them? Treat them well, treat them with kindness, treat them with consideration. Oh my God, this is revolutionary. What do you do with a person who does this? He sent them to Adrianople, which is across the Bosphorus. And then he thought, no, people are coming, people are coming. My spies are telling me people are coming. So he sent him to the hellhole of the Mediterranean, better known as Akka, and to prison in Akka. And Baha'u'llah was only allowed his family and a certain number of followers. Meanwhile, back in Iran, it was still a growing movement. So the Shah decided to start, doing what people in power usually do when they feel threatened. I might also add, it's still going on in Iran today. If you are a Baha'i, you are viewed as an enemy of the state, and they literally can walk into your house, arrest you, confiscate your house, and throw you in prison for unnamed charges, unnamed times. If you're a woman, what will happen to you is you will be arrested by the modesty police. Because in the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah said very early on, mankind is a bird. One wing is men, one wing is women. And if one wing is larger and more important than the other, the bird will not fly. When he made the public declaration in Baghdad, in the Garden of Rizwan, a follower of his, who was a very noted Iranian poet named Tahareh, he made the announcement women were not to be veiled anymore. They were not to hide their faces. They were to be as open as men. And she appeared in the garden without her veil, ripped it off. Men literally cut their own throats in shock of such a scandalous thing. Tahareh refused after that to wear the veil. And she ended up getting thrown into a well. That's usually what happens with martyrs. So in Iran today, Baha'i women do not veil. What do the modesty police want you to do? Veil, cover your face, make sure no hair is showing, the whole bit. So it is not unusual for Baha'i women to be arrested, for unnamed charges and to be executed. In fact, 10 years ago, 10 women were hung because they were Baha'is. This is still going on. Baha'u'llah stressed, Abdul Baha, his son who took over when Baha'u'llah died in 1893. Abdul Baha was the guider of the faith. He basically said that education was the most important thing, and if you had money for only one of your children, you had a son and a daughter, you educated the daughter. You made sure the daughter was educated, because the woman is the first teacher of the child. And if the woman is uneducated, the child will grow up uneducated. It is the woman who gives the spiritual grounding, the moral grounding, the basic education to the child. Do you know how scandalous this was? In 19th century, anywhere, that women should be educated to the greatest extent possible? You see why the Baha'i faith does not proselytize. That's why it took me over 12 years to become a Baha'i. Because nobody's coming to my door knocking, nobody's handing me pamphlets, nobody's calling me up saying, or emailing me today saying, oh, hey, come to this, come to that, come to the. No, it's something that you come to. And as my friend Ellie said to me at the time, she said, you realize you declared that you were a Baha'i, and then you took it back. And I said, what do you mean? I was spending the night at her house. Ellie, her husband, and a friend of ours, Terry, were there. They were on the local spiritual assembly. And I said, I really believe in Baha'u'llah. That's a declaration. That says, yes, I am a follower of Baha'u'llah. I believe in what he's doing. I believe in his message. But then I said, but I can't declare now. I need to explain it to my parents. Now, you must understand, my brother Matt had died 3 months before. And I knew that if I suddenly announced to my parents, oh, by the way, I've become a Baha'i, something they couldn't pronounce, didn't know anything about, they would have thought I joined some crazy cult, which it isn't, but they didn't know that. And I will be honest, I came back to the States in 78, and my grandmother thought it was a wonderful religion, thoroughly loved it. It took my mother nearly 20 years to say, I think I understand why you became a Baha'i. You can't force, you can't change, that's the way it is. Now, in the faith, science and religion are equal, but if there's a conflict, science is more important and is probably truer than religion. And all of this goes back to the concept of responsibility for one's own actions, investigating the truth for yourself, checking things out, not just accepting. Now, as I said, in the faith, we don't have a ministry. We don't have that. What we have is what's called an administrative order, and it starts at the local level. I'm an isolated believer. As far as I know, I'm the only one in Middleboro. Well, as far as I know. If you have 2 or more adults, then you have what's called a group. If you have 9 adults, then you have what's known as a local spiritual assembly. And there are specific times that these are all established. The local spiritual assembly oversees the whole community and deals with everything from funerals to marriages to divorces to problem children. And I have been on local spiritual assemblies. I was in Costa Rica, and I dealt with everything but the funeral. I've never dealt with a Baha'i funeral. I've dealt with a wedding. Once you have a regional group, which will, the country is divided into regions. And once a year you meet in a local convention and you elect a representative to the national convention. The national convention meets yearly and they elect the National Spiritual Assembly, which disseminates the word from the Universal House of Justice, which is located in Haifa, Akka, which is where the faith is now based. This is where the tombs of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, the Bab, are all located. And if you go, if you were to just type in on Google Baha'i Gardens, you will see the gardens in Haifa. They are spectacular. Every country is supposed to build a house of worship. You can build local houses of worship, but most of the countries build one. The last one that was built is in American Samoa, I believe. There's one being built now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There was one architectural awards in Chile. The oldest still existing house of worship is in Wilmette, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. And the cornerstone was laid by Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha and his father were forbidden by the Ottoman Empire to travel, to leave Akka. But that didn't matter, because people came to them. And then people left and passed the messages along. I have heard stories of people who became Baha'is simply by seeing the word Baha'u'llah. That seems a little strange to me, but that's the way it is. Can't tell. Now, I urge you, the faith is quite up to date. There's a website for the Baha'i faith. There is, if you Google the illustrations, the pictures, the houses of worship, the one in Delhi is in the form of a lotus, and it's absolutely stunning. They are all on the same frame. There are 9 walls, there are 9 doors, there are 9 gardens, there are 9 fountains where possible. But within that framework, what is built has been absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And you go in, anyone can go into a Baha'i temple. Anyone can go in, you sit, you meditate. There may be someone doing readings. It doesn't matter. Now, one of the other things that drove me to the faith or attracted me, and this is going to sound sillier than anything, was the fact that when Baha'u'llah did his revelations, he did them to his secretaries. And the secretaries would write it down. he was not an illiterate man. And this is something that always struck me because I am a librarian, I am a reader, and I am a lover of the word. He would the next day take the previous day's revelations and correct them so that he would be sure that no error would come in. In Haifa, at the Universal House of Justice, there are archives with the original writings. And periodically, they will go through to make sure that the translations, so that the Kitabikan that I have, this is the Book of Certainty, this is not the sacred text. This is the revelation that Baha'u'llah gave us. These are his writings. Or, like if you had a collection of Baha'i prayers, this is Prayers for Seekers, which is basically just prayers. They would check them. They checked to be sure, yes, this is what was said. This is the wording. This is how it was said. Now, a couple of years ago, got a new prayer book because mine was getting a little beat up. We are mandated to pray 3 times a day. It's not all that difficult. I can't sleep now without doing it. And if I miss, it's like something's missing. What did I miss? What did I not do? And nobody knows if I missed. I mean, this isn't something that you're going to go and confess and say, oh, I'm terrible. I didn't say my prayers. There are, by the way, no food restrictions either. Abdul Baha said that in the future, there would be less consumption of meat. But he never said, be a vegetarian. He basically simply said, in the future, he saw there would be less consumption of meat. But you want to eat meat? Have a steak. He didn't say it like that, but I did. So you're not getting the restrictions. I think I'm wandering a little because there are points that I try to get in and I don't want to bore you. The administrative order overseas gives us the framework. The individual makes their own choices. When you marry, when you have children, you can raise them in the Baha'i faith, but they do not necessarily become Baha'is. This is not like getting baptized or anything like that. You are simply giving the child a framework, a moral conduct, behavior framework. When they are 16, I think, or 17, they cannot become, my mind just went blink on me. They have to make the choice when they are adults. And they can choose not to be Baha'is. And there's no blame to them. That is their choice. They are responsible for their own actions. They do the investigation, they do things, and if they say, yeah, this isn't for me, I think I'd rather be Jewish. Fine. It's tough, but that's their decision. Does anyone have any questions? Because I can blather on for another hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I am very excited. I didn't realize how excited I was about being a Baha'i. This sounds silly. Until Tanya said, would I come speak? And then I started doing rereading and rechecking and And I got excited again. Yes.
So there are these beautiful houses of worship.
Yep.
How are they used? I want to know, how are they used? Do people just kind of go in and out and pray?
Yep.
Or is there are group things?
Well,
Are children
in Wilmette,
any sort of group, or is it strictly
in Wilmette, as I understand it, they do children's classes, they do group tours, they do silent meditations, they do concerts. The acoustics, I gather, are stunning. I have seen online services from Sydney, Australia, and the acoustics are unearthly almost. A friend of mine did a volunteer service at the Universal House of Justice in Haifa.
service? I mean, it's with somebody speaking and people sitting listening.
No,
Is that what a service is?
no.
What's a service?
Well, you come in, you sit down. You can say whatever prayers you like. You can commune silently with God. Someone may get up and say, I'd like to do a reading. And say something like, O ye beloved of God, repose not yourselves on your couches, nay, bestir yourselves as soon as you recognize your Lord the Creator and hear the things that have befallen him, and hasten to his assistance. Unloose your tongues, proclaim unceasingly his cause. This shall be better for you than all the treasures of the past and the future, if you be of them that comprehend this truth. And then you meditate on that. It's not me saying, this is what you must believe. This is what the interpretation is. This comes into the whole concept of independent investigation of the truth. I brought a couple of books. I have Reflections from the Sacred Writings of Baha'u'llah. I have Prayers for Seekers. And I would strongly recommend Baha'i Basics, which I purchased from Amazon, which gives you a general idea. We have a calendar of 19 months, of 19 days, with beginning on the 2nd of March, which is Nowruz, which is the New Year. And the period just before it is what we call a Yamiha, or intercalary days, which is a kind of a Christmas and the end of February. And every 19 days, the people of the community meet together, and we have food, and we say some prayers. And if there's something important that the National wants us to know about, they tell us. They say, here, we got a letter. Read the letter. That's it. It's not a case. This is the lovely thing about being a Baha'i. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you what to think.
Do you share your journey with other people, or is that kept inside?
For me, because of my personality, I'm very private. As Tanya has said, she's known me for over 30 years, and even she didn't know the full journey. We don't proselytize. We don't stand out in the parks, hand out flyers. We don't play cymbals and sing and dance in the streets like the Hare Krishnas. That's not what the faith is about. We will give public talks. This is a public talk. But that's more than that, that's all. My expectation is this is the faith. This is what has brought me joy and happiness. And yes, I did finally learn how to say Baha'u'llah. But there are a lot of other languages that I don't know.
Where does the money come from?
Individuals.
How?
Well, this is going to sound very strange. It's better known as, I'll give them money. Nobody asks, nobody demands. If you have a 19-day feast in a group, there may be 3 boxes out. You can drop money in if you want, you don't have to. People do donations. They have investments. But when they built the House of Worship in Wilmette, and this was specifically stated by Abdu'l-Baha, we want you to build one in Chicago was the chosen city. It took them 40 years. Abdu'l-Baha, I believe, laid the cornerstone in 1921. He did a tour of the United States. It was not completed until, I believe, 1956. And yes, I know there was a world war and there was a problem with getting materials, but still, that's how long it took. Because when you look at the houses of worship, you will see these aren't ugly buildings. These aren't buildings that don't challenge architects. It's stunning, it's amazing, and the money comes from individuals and individual believers. There is something that is known as hukukullah, which is called the right of God, but this is one of our responsibilities, is to give hukukullah. All right, there's a formula. Let me tell you. I read the whole thing on hukukullah and went, I have no idea what my worth would be or how much I would give. And if I'm figuring it out, it comes down to $1.98. I didn't understand that. I have had classes since then. And what do they actually come out to? Basically is you write to the office and you say, hi, this is my hukukullah, this is what I'm giving. Nobody comes after you and says, is that enough? It's what you choose, your responsibility.
Number 9 must be important. What's important about number 9?
It's a perfect number. Well, it's also, all numbers go into it. It is a complete number. It provides, I wanted very much, but could not find a whole series of pictures of the houses of worship because they are, in effect, stunning. But, for example, in America, Samoa, where they have just built theirs, they build it out of native materials. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is not what you'd call a real wealthy, it's stunning to look at, but it's built out of wood and native labor. Now, I kind of have to sit back. There are a couple of other things that you are required, or that we have to do. One is we should go on pilgrimage to Haifa, and there are tours. However, what you normally do is you write to the national office. I did that twice, and it was really not a time for Americans to be traveling to the Holy Land. And it's also not, they limit the number of people because there are so many Baha'is that want to go on pilgrimage. They limit them so that the town and the country can handle it. I know there's stuff I'm missing. I know there are things I haven't said. I know there are things I should say. You guys have made me really happy. You know that? It's like discovering a long-lost lover all over again. Thank you.